Hi everyone, William here. Today's question is, were the Texas power outages caused by renewable energy? My answer for this one is no. This past week, I'm sure you're aware that the US experienced a relatively rare and ultimately very dangerous deep freeze affecting most of the country. The southern states have been in particular danger due to the infrequency of such an event there. Texas has undergone a massive power outage affecting millions. At one point, half of the Texas population was told to boil their water. We can only imagine at this time the ultimate damage caused by bursting pipes and other failures. It is unfortunate that during a time of tragedy like this, when people really need to be pulling together to limit suffering and loss of life, we're forced to combat egregious misinformation. Some Texas politicians have decided to use this event to go after a favorite target of theirs, renewable energy, specifically wind and solar power. Incredibly, there are media outlets pushing this narrative as well. There is, of course, nothing wrong with arguing the merits and specifics of the use of renewables. What we should not be accepting is the spreading of disinformation. Power in Texas is managed by ERCOT, E-R-C-O-T, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. Texas is not a part of the rest of the U.S. power grid, so as not to be under the jurisdiction of the federal government. ERCOT initially said that frozen wind turbines and natural gas shortages were the issue. They later clarified to say that the natural gas problems were the primary reason for the power outages. Armed with this early information, Texas Governor Greg Abbott went on to Fox News, and he chose to blame the wind turbines only. He further used this as a reason why we need to rely on fossil fuels for the future, and cited this as evidence that the Green New Deal would be a mistake for the country's future. If you watch the news coverage on this topic, you will see Republicans referencing the Green New Deal quite a bit. If you're not familiar with this, it has had a few iterations, but it's basically a congressional non-binding proposal to eliminate carbon emissions from the US within the next decade. Regardless of the specific future of this proposal, fossil fuels themselves have no future. This is a simple reality, as they are in fact finite. I do want to point out that all realistic proposals for our future power generation do have us burning some natural gas, say around 20%, for quite some time, with renewables or nuclear providing the baseload power. There is debate as to whether the nuclear part is actually needed as something to hold us over until such a time that renewables could realistically account for the other 80%. Now, these numbers are rough. It depends on the particular proposal or the study that you're looking at. Now, Governor Abbott is being accused of using this talking point for deflection purposes, as he and others in Texas are being blamed for the state of unpreparedness that Texas finds itself in. There are other high-profile Republicans who decided to contribute to the misinformation early, like Texas Representative Dan Crenshaw, who supplied us with a facts-free set of Twitter posts on the subject, and of course, Lauren Boebert, who backed up Governor Abbott on his claim that this should be considered evidence for the unreliability of renewable energy. Now on to the media outlets. It's easy to harp on the importance of both critical thinking skills and media literacy, but these things really are two skill sets that are essential to navigate today's world with any kind of objective success. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that not many people have actually developed these skills, for a variety of reasons. We therefore need to hold media outlets accountable for the spread of misinformation. How do we do this? Can the free market handle it? Regulations? Third-party fact-checking? I love this subject, but it's beyond the scope of this video. I'd love to give it its own treatment. But we can all contribute by at least disallowing the spreading of disinformation when confronted with it, especially if it is originating with our own political group. We should be the first to address it. So let's go back to the actual claims here. Regardless of one's political leanings, these claims should not be able to pass a cursory glance at the facts or even an extended thought on the subject. If we're going to lay blame on a particular technology, wouldn't it make sense to blame the one that provides the most power at the moment? That, of course, would be fossil fuels, gas and coal. Nuclear power has also been affected. But to be clear, the largest contributor is natural gas at over 50% of the capacity, where wind accounts for around 13%. Frozen instrumentation and valves at the gas-fired power plants and frozen wellheads appear to be the major issues. The people blaming wind turbines, if they legitimately thought that it made up much of the power supply, would also then have to be ignorant of the fact that northern parts of the US and other countries with harsh winters all use wind and solar power. It's not a problem if you design for it, just like with fossil and nuclear power. The actual problem is a lack of winterization of the power infrastructure, and this is something that was not unknown. After a similar cold snap in 2011, a report was issued with many suggestions to avoid major shutdowns. The report was largely ignored, and the report itself references a 1989 report from another cold snap. This report was also ignored. The 2011 report is called the Report on Outages and Curtailments during the Southwest Cold Weather Event of February 1 to 5, 2011. This was produced by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. You can go download the PDF of the report online. It's 357 pages. A quick browse will show you that these suggestions were relatively simple and inexpensive. Costs are detailed within the report. Remember, much of the country already does this. I should point out that there were some municipalities in Texas that did take action on these suggestions, and unsurprisingly, they were largely unaffected by the cold. The report has much detail on how to winterize the various types of plants, as you would expect. Some examples being for pipelines and instrumentation, you have various forms of heat tracing, electrical, glycol, and steam heating systems with insulation, of course, gaskets and O-rings of the correct temperature service, and enclosures around specific equipment that are particularly vulnerable. And then for wind turbines, there are several heating and de-icing technologies, as well as special coatings to keep the ice off of the blades. But these are just a handful of the remedies that are described within. So was the Texas power outage caused by the unreliability of renewable energy? No. This isn't a both sides have valid points type of issue. It's one of reality versus purposeful disinformation. And of course, the obvious reason someone would use misinformation to bolster their argument is because they do not have actual facts on their side. The good news is that reality tends to win out in the long run, but unfortunately, misinformation can lead to much unneeded suffering in the interim. We all understand that politics is not science or philosophy, but it is informed by them. And one of the fundamental principles of science is intellectual honesty. This is something we have to absolutely insist on if our goal is to make reality-based decisions. This cannot be a politically partisan issue. The political decisions themselves will be partisan because that is the appropriate time to apply value judgments, but it is essential that we all be starting with the same set of facts. I hope you found this subject interesting. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and I want to hear what you have to think about this. Be kind, be safe, and I'll see you later.